Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Years ago, I began recording the bedtime stories I told my children every night. Now, we would like to share those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children.
Once upon a time, there was a young beaver named Alice. Alice was 5 years old, and she was very excited because all winter she had been talking to her mommy and her daddy and her older brother, Wallace, about how this year, this spring, was going to be the spring that she was going to be big enough to be allowed to help her mother and her father and Wallace chew down trees, cut them down, and drag them to help repair the lodge and the dam from all the damage that's done with the winter ice. Because as winter ice melts, beavers have to get busy. They have to cut down trees and repair the damage because the ice in the winter sort of damages their dam and the lodge where they live. They have to fix the damage. Well, the spring ice was just starting to thaw when something happened that changed all of Alice's plans. She was in her room in the lodge, and she had a thick stick of hickory, and she was gnawing on it.
What's hickory?
Hickory is a very tough wood. She was gnawing on it.
What's gnawing?
Gnawing is chewing. To practice cutting down trees and practice chewing wood, but she was gnawing on it when suddenly she felt something weird. She felt one of her teeth sort of move a little bit as she was gnawing. She thought, that's peculiar, and she went back to chewing, and she noticed as she chewed that one of her teeth was definitely getting loose. She ran immediately to find her mommy. "Mommy! Mommy!" she called. "Mommy, one of my teeth is loose." And her mommy said, "Well, that's okay, Alice. You're 5. You should be 6 soon. It's the normal time when most little beavers lose their baby teeth and start to get big teeth." She said that once you lose it, you can put it under your stick when you go to bed at night, and the tooth beaver will come during the night and take your tooth.
What?
And leave you some nice hickory bark as a treat. And Alice said, but, okay. And she went back, and it was just a couple days later that she did indeed lose one of her big front teeth that she used for gnawing trees. Well, she took the tooth and she put it underneath her stick that she rested her head on at night. And the next morning when she woke up, there was some nice, fine, yummy hickory bark, and she chewed it up. It was delicious.
She chewed a tree up?
Yeah, beavers eat tree bark.
Oh. Ew. I'm not like to eat tree. That'd be yuck.
Well, you're not a beaver.
Yeah.
If you were a beaver, you might think they were very tasty. But since you're a little girl, I agree. I don't think you should eat trees.
Because they would be yuck. Then you'd have to drink lots of water to drink. Plus, I like climbing trees.
Mm-hmm. And beavers don't climb trees. Anyway, so then Alice went...
Some do.
Nope, no beavers climb trees. So then beavers cut down trees.
But I'm talking about different kinds of beavers.
No, I don't think there is a kind of beaver that can climb trees. They swim really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. So anyway, then Alice went and she started practicing chewing using just one tooth. But just as the spring ice was really melting off, and the morning that she saw her daddy and Wallace getting ready to go out and start tree hunting, she went with them, and the very first tree that she started gnawing on, she felt her other front tooth give a wobble, and she thought, oh no. and she could only work with them a couple hours. She helped cut down some young trees and drag them to the dam and set them nicely in place. But by lunchtime, her tooth was so loose and it fell out. Well, she got some more bark. This time it was oak bark, which is not quite so tasty. But she was very sad because the next day her mommy and Wallace and her daddy all went out and started working on cutting trees. And even though she was 5 years old and almost 6, she did not get to help because she had no front teeth. Wallace patted her on the back and said, "Don't worry, sis. They'll grow back in and you can help next year." And she said, "But I was looking forward to helping this year." And she did get to help a little bit. She got to, once they had cut trees down, she got to help guide them to the right place in the lodge or in the dam. But after a while, that just didn't seem much fun when you couldn't actually do any of the cutting yourself. So she told her mom and dad that she was going to take a swim. And she did. She swam up out of their pond that they had created by damming the stream. And she swam up the stream.
Hey, Alice, join the club.
She swam quite some ways. And as she was swimming upstream, she noticed that she was starting to go by a campground where there were a lot of people. And as she swam out the other side of the campground, she came to an area where some of the trees were cleared. And she thought, I wonder what beaver family lives here. Let's cut these trees down. And then she heard a peculiar noise. The noise went like this. And she decided that that was a very odd noise. So she got out to see what it was. And she finally found it. It was a human. And the human had a very loud machine. He would pull a cord on the machine and the machine would go. And the human would take the machine and would put it up against a tree, and the machine would cut right into the tree. It would go, timber, and the tree would fall down. And Alice went, wow. And then she waited. And soon the humans put their machine down, and they went to go have lunch. Now, for people, stealing is wrong. But Alice was a beaver, and she did not know what stealing was. And she thought that she would like to have the human's machine, so she snuck up and she took it. It was just a small chainsaw, and she had watched how they had used it. So she took one paw and she dragged it to the stream, and then she floated it on a piece of wood, a flat piece of wood. She floated it, and then she guided it down the stream. She swam back downstream until she reached her very own pond. And her brother and her father said, "What's that, Alice?" And Alice said, "I'm going to help cut trees." And they said, "You can't, your teeth are gone." She goes, "I don't need teeth. I've got this." And she showed it to them. They said, "What's that?" And she said, "Give me a tree to cut." And they said, "Okay." And her father and her brother both stood there. And she said, "Stand back." And she twisted the key and the machine, and she pulled the little cord, and it went. And they said, "That is so loud, Alice." She said, "Watch." And she picked it up and she set it against the tree, and the machine went. And the tree went right over, and her dad and her brother went, "Wow." And from that, the rest of that day, it was Alice's job to cut the trees, and everybody else hauled the trees to the dam. Her dad showed her which trees to cut, and because Alice could cut the trees so fast, they got all of their work done. Their work that usually took them 2 weeks, they got it all done in 1 day, which meant that they were going to get to go on spring break early. For spring break, they usually went to a pond, 2 ponds downstream. It was the biggest pond in the area, and all the beavers went there. And they had fun climbing up on the lodge and diving off and playing tag in the water and playing Marco Polo.
Let's What's Marco Polo?
Marco Polo is where you close your eyes in the water, and the person with their eyes closed says Marco, and everybody else says Polo, and the person with their eyes closed has to find the other people just by hearing them. But anyway, before they left for spring break, Alice's mommy and daddy told her that the machine, although it was an amazing thing, and they had never seen a beaver use a chainsaw before, that it was time to take it back because it did not belong to them. So Alice floated the chainsaw on the piece of wood, and she swam up out of the pond and upriver past the campground until she found the clearing, and then she very quietly snuck it back into camp at night. And the men in the camp were very confused. They were confused because they could not figure out where the chainsaw had been. And then they were even more confused when they woke up the next morning because it was right there where they had remembered seeing it last. And they could not imagine how they could have missed seeing it there. And they thought up all sorts of strange stories about maybe it getting covered with leaves, or just maybe it got knocked over. But none of them came up with a story as strange as the truth, which was that a toothless beaver named Alice had borrowed it to help her family build their dam.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was created by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it or leave a review on your podcast provider. Our website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com, and you can also find us on most social media. I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.